Dakota Territory, July 1873. The sun had not yet cut across the prairie when Persephone Oakes kicked off her boots and ran. Her breath caught in the dry air, heart pounding against the corset laced too tight for anything but misery. Dust clung to the hem of her dress, her skirts bunched in her fists as she fled across the open land behind her father's property. The sky was still the color of bruised lilac, dawn just breaking over the hills, but she knew they would come after her soon. She did not wait to find out. Behind her, the whitewashed clapboard house her father built with hands calloused from hard deals and harder words. Inside it slept her future, a man twice her age, with tobacco-stained teeth and a temper that had once sent a ranch hand to the doctor for speaking out of turn. He was her father's business partner, and her husband-to-be by noon. Her father had made the arrangement. Persephone had not been asked. "I will not marry that man," she had told him. "You will," he had said, "or you will not be my daughter anymore." So she ran. Out the back, over the pasture fence, through the knee-high grass that cut her legs and whispered like voices against her skin. She did not know where she was going, only away. By mid-morning, the sun burned high and hot, and her feet ached from miles of walking. She had no plan. No food. Just a small knife tucked in her boot and the determination not to look back. When the hoofbeats came behind her, she spun fast, ready to draw the knife, but it was no posse, no angry groom-to-be. One man. On a painted horse. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his black hair tied back, a long scar running from temple to jaw. His eyes were steady, quiet. "Sioux." Persephone froze. He did not raise his voice. Just looked at her, then said in measured English, "You are far from safety." She backed up a step. "I am not going back. I did not say you should." His horse shifted beneath him, ears twitching. He dismounted slowly, hands open, not a threat. She stared. "You were Lakota?" He nodded. "My name is Mato Tahni." His voice was deep and calm. "You are alone." "I left an arranged marriage," she said, lifting her chin. "At dawn." His brow moved slightly. "Then you were brave." She blinked. No one had said that to her before. He stepped forward and held out a water skin. She hesitated, then took it. The water was cool and she drank like her body had been waiting for it all morning. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I do not know," she admitted. Mato nodded once. "Then come. I will take you to my people. It is not far." She looked at his horse, then back at him. "Why would you help me?" His gaze held hers. "Because you ran from a trap, and I do not leave people behind." Persephone did not know why, but she believed him. She nodded. He swung up onto the horse, then reached down a hand. She took it and he pulled her up behind him. They rode through grasslands that swayed like golden waves. The wind tugged at her hair, and the weight of her fear began to loosen. Mato did not speak much. He rode steady, his body warm against hers, his presence something solid in a world that had fallen out from under her. She had never been close to a man like this before, never knew what it meant to feel safe around one. When they reached his village by a slow river bend, Persephone tensed, unsure what would meet her. But no one shouted. No one glared. Children peeked out from lodges made of buffalo hide. Women glanced her way, curious but not unkind. Mato spoke to an elder woman, who studied Persephone quietly and nodded. "She says you may stay tonight," Mato told her. "I will sleep on the ground," Persephone said quickly. "No," he said. "You will stay in my lodge. It is proper." She hesitated, but something in his voice left no room for shame, only care. Inside his lodge it was dark and cool, the smell of leather and sage. He gave her a blanket. "Sleep. You are safe here." She sat down, legs trembling now that the day's fear had worn off. "They will look for me." "Let them," he said. Persephone lay down, the blanket tucked over her, her fingers still curled tight. She watched him through half-lidded eyes as he sat cross-legged near the entrance, arms resting on his knees, watching the fire's low glow. He did not touch her. Did not speak another word. Just stayed. The next morning, she woke to the smell of roasted meat and the sound of women talking outside. Mato was gone, but the blanket had been pulled higher over her shoulders at some point in the night. She stepped outside, heart in her throat. But no one stared. A young woman handed her a bowl of warm stew and smiled. Mato returned before the sun reached its peak. He nodded at her, then gestured for her to walk with him. They crossed the river on foot, his pace slow so she could keep up. "Why did you not marry him?" he asked. Persephone looked down at the water. "Because it was not love. It was prison." Mato was quiet a long time. Then he said, "My brother's wife died last winter. He has 2 children. Now he wants to give them to someone else." Her eyes widened. "Why?" "He says he cannot care for them." His jaw tightened. "He wants to leave. What will happen to them?" Mato looked at her. "I said I would take them." "You?" Her voice was soft. "I will not let them be left behind." Her throat tightened. That night she met the children. A girl of 5, a boy of 7. Both solemn, both quiet. Mato crouched beside them, his big hands gentle on their backs. "They are called Mina and Micah," he said. Persephone knelt beside them. "Hello," she said softly. Mina reached out and touched Persephone's sleeve. She stayed. Days passed. Persephone helped cook, helped gather. She learned how to braid Mina's hair and how to calm Micah's nightmares. When the wind came cold one evening, Mato handed her a fur-lined shawl without a word. She caught his hand as he turned to go. He stopped. Their eyes met. "I think I was meant to find you," she said. His voice was low. "I think I was waiting." They stood close, the firelight flickering between them. Persephone reached up, touched his cheek, traced the scar gently. He closed his eyes. Then finally he kissed her. It was not rushed, not wild, just sure, like a vow. And in that moment everything she had run from, every fear, every night alone, fell away. She had found something better than escape. She had found him. The wind carried the breath of early autumn, dry and sharp, stirring the grasses in long, whispering waves by the edge of the cottonwoods. Persephone tugged the last of the soaked linen from the river stones, her fingers stiff with cold. She wrung the cloth, careful and slow, then spread it over the low scrub to dry. Mina crouched nearby, her small hands arranging pebbles in a silent pattern only she seemed to understand. Micah had gone off earlier with Mato and a group of older boys to check the traps laid deeper in the valley. Persephone had offered to go, but Mato had simply said, "You've done enough already," and touched her elbow in that quiet way he did when he didn't want her to take offense. She straightened, brushing her damp palms down her skirt, and looked toward the tree line. A flicker of movement caught her eye, a pair of women returning from the hills with baskets full of wild onions and roots. One of them, a woman who had never spoken more than a few words to Persephone, gave her a long, unreadable glance before turning away. Persephone swallowed hard. Some days she forgot how out of place she must look here, her pale skin and yellow hair a map of foreignness. Other days it pressed down on her like an extra layer of skin. "You do not need to keep proving yourself every hour," a voice said at her side. She turned. Mato had returned without her noticing, his moccasins soft on the packed earth. "I wasn't," she began, but he raised his hand gently. "You care for them," he said, nodding toward the children. "That is enough." She lowered her gaze. I don't want to be seen as someone who only takes." Mato's brow tightened. "You are not." He stepped closer, the scent of cedar and crushed grass clinging to his shirt. She noticed a new scrape across the back of his hand. "What happened?" she asked, reaching for it. He didn't pull away. "One of the traps snapped early. I was careless." Her thumb brushed over the raw skin. "You should wrap this." He tilted his head. "Will you?" She nodded and walked with him back to the lodge. Inside, the air was warm from the fire pit. She unrolled a strip of cloth from her sewing basket and dipped it in boiled water before pressing it to his hand. He didn't flinch. "You've taken on a great deal," she said quietly. "With Mina and Micah. They are not a burden." "I know," she said. "But it's more than most men would choose." He studied her. "When I was a child, I watched a man leave his family because the sickness came. He said it was better to survive than to stay. I remember the way his wife looked when she stood alone outside their lodge. Persephone tied the cloth gently around his hand. I think, he said, you know what that looks like too. The knot in her throat was sudden and sharp. She nodded. He touched her wrist, his fingers warm. You are not alone now. She met his eyes. I don't want to be. Later that evening, Mato sat with the council, speaking in low tones about the coming winter and the shifting herds. Persephone stayed back, helping Mina settle under the firs. Micah curled up without a word, his face turned to the wall. She sat near them, weaving a line of thread through a tear in a shirt sleeve, her needle moving steady with the firelight. When Mato returned, he crouched beside her. It will be a hard season, he said. Some think we should move north before the snow. Will you? I won't leave the river, he said. Not unless there's no choice. She nodded slowly. And if others go? I will still stay. They sat in silence, the fire crackling low. I've been thinking, she said after a while. I could teach the children letters. Not just Mina and Micah. All of them. If it would be welcome. He looked at her, surprised. You can read. My mother taught me before she died. I know enough. It might help someday if they ever leave this place. Mato leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Then teach them. If that's what you want. It is. He reached for her hand. Then let it be so. She felt the weight of his fingers over hers, solid and sure. The firelight danced across the planes of his face, and in that moment, the part of her that had once belonged to someone else, her father's will, that house, that man, felt distant, like something she might have dreamt long ago. Outside, an owl called once, low and long. Mato didn't move away. Neither did she. The earth had begun to crack with frost by the time Persephone first taught Mina to trace her name in the dirt with a split reed dipped in river clay. They sat beneath a cottonwood stripped bare by wind, its limbs stretched wide like bones reaching toward the sky. Mina's brow furrowed as she dragged the reed through the soil, the marks uneven but careful. Persephone knelt beside her, one hand steadying the child's wrist. Let the line curve here, she said softly. It's not about perfection. Just knowing the shape. Mina didn't respond, but she didn't stop either. Behind them, voices rose in low song. A group of women were tanning hides near the fire pit, the sound of scraping tools rhythmic beneath their singing. Persephone had come to recognize some of the words. Though she didn't speak Lakota, she understood what mattered. Those stories passed on, grief honored, joy folded into labor. Mato returned near dusk, his shoulders dusted with powdery snow from the high ridges. He led 2 ponies, both laden with bundles of dried meat and sagebrush. Persephone stood when she saw him, brushing her hands against her skirt, though she wasn't sure why. You found the herd, she said. He nodded, lifting a pack from the pony's back. They've moved east, but not far. We'll have enough. She stepped forward, reaching for one of the bundles. Let me help. He handed it over without protest, his gaze lingering on her face. You've been teaching. I have, she said, glancing at Mina, still bent over her letters. She doesn't say much, but she listens. She watches everything, Mato said. Then he added, quieter, so do I. Inside the lodge later, the fire casting long shapes onto the hide walls, he sat across from her, his legs folded beneath him. The children had already curled into sleep, their breathing soft beneath the furs. You weren't afraid to come here, he said, not as a question, but like he'd been holding it back. I didn't have the luxury, she answered, threading a patch through a worn sleeve. Fear doesn't help when there's nowhere else to go. That's not always true, he said, and his voice held something she hadn't heard before. Regret, maybe. Some people run because they're afraid. Others stay because they are. She set the fabric down. Did you ever want to leave? I thought about it once, he said. When my brother left, I thought, maybe that's what men do when the world asks too much. Persephone didn't look away. But you stayed. I couldn't walk past the ones who were still here. The fire snapped. She leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. You carry a great deal. You always look like you're holding the weight of something you won't admit. He studied the flames. I was supposed to die last winter. She went still. I caught a fever after the snow came, he said. For 3 days I didn't wake. The old women said it would end one way or the other. My sister kept a fire going and made cedar tea. When I opened my eyes, she was still there. Persephone's voice was low. That's why you don't waste words. He nodded once. I speak only what matters. The rest is wind. She reached across the space between them and placed her hand over his. He didn't move. I'm still learning how to be here, she said. I know I don't belong in the way others do. But I want to. Not for the sake of being accepted. For the sake of building something real. Mato turned his palm to face hers, their fingers pressed together now. You already are, he said. The next morning, she rose before the sun and braided Mina's hair with quiet fingers. The child leaned against her knee, still half asleep. Outside, the sky was the color of ash and coral, the first light catching on the bend of the river. When Mato appeared, wrapped in a thick buffalo hide, Persephone stepped to meet him. I want to help with the trapping, she said. He didn't question it. Then bring your gloves. They walked beyond the village in silence, the land crunching beneath their boots. When they reached the snare lines, he showed her how to reset a sprung trap, how to check for signs of fresh passage, crushed grass, snapped twigs, the faint indentation of hoof or claw. Her fingers numbed quickly, but she didn't complain. You're stubborn, he said, not unkindly. She smiled. So I've been told. He watched her a long moment. I think I was waiting for someone who would choose this life. Even when it's cold. Even when it's bitter. She looked down at the trap between them. I didn't choose it to prove anything. I know. She straightened, her breath a cloud between them. I chose it because it feels like the first true thing I've ever known. He stepped closer, his voice low. Then stay. Not as a guest. Not as someone passing through. Persephone didn't hesitate. Yes. He reached for her then, not like before, not tentative, not testing. He wrapped his arms around her and pressed his forehead to hers, breath mingling in the cold air. There were no vows spoken. None were needed. What passed between them was quieter than words, but more binding than any promise made before a preacher or paper. They would build the rest of their life here, hand in hand, in the shape of every small choice made with care. And the frost on the earth would give way to spring. The first snow came overnight, soft and soundless. Persephone woke to a pale hush outside the lodge, the world muffled beneath a blanket of white. Inside, the fire had burned low, and the air held the faint scent of pine smoke and ash. She reached for her shawl and stepped outside, boots crunching over the fresh crust. The river ran slower now, its banks rimmed with ice. Mina and Micah were with Mato's sister for the morning, helping prepare tallow for candles. Persephone had offered, but Mato had touched her back and said, let them learn with her today. Come with me. They walked west, toward the ridgeline beyond the grazing hills, where the wind cut sharper and the sky opened wider. The snow deepened there, untouched but for a trail of rabbit prints and the long drag of a fox's tail. Mato stopped beneath a crooked pine that leaned out over a shallow ravine. He pointed to a cluster of rocks nestled beneath its roots. My father buried an offering there the day I was born, he said. A blade and a strip of hide from his first horse. He said it was to thank the spirits for letting me come. Persephone glanced at the rocks, half covered in snow. Do you ever go back and look for it? No, he said. It's not mine to dig up. She pulled her shawl tighter. I never knew anything about where I came from. Not really. My mother was from Virginia, but she never spoke of it. My father only talked about profit. Mato looked at her then, his brow drawn. Is that why you never say his name? She nodded. I don't carry it anymore. They stood in silence, the wind tugging at the edge of her sleeve. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a folded square of cloth. I've been making something, she said. For you and the children. He took it, turning it over in his hands. It was a small quilt, its stitching uneven but firm, scraps of old shirts, hide remnants, and a strip of blue muslin she'd found in her pack when she first arrived. I thought it might keep them warm, she added, her voice quieter now. When I was little, my mother made one for me. I don't have it anymore, but I remember the weight of it. It felt like being held. Mato ran his fingers over the seams. They will sleep better with this. She hesitated, watching him. And you? He folded the quilt carefully, then looked at her. I sleep better knowing you're near. That night, a storm blew in from the north, shaking the lodge poles and rattling the hide walls. Persephone woke when Micah cried out, his breath catching as he sat upright, chest heaving. She moved quickly, kneeling beside him. You're safe, she whispered, brushing his damp hair back. It's only wind. He clung to her sleeve, silent but trembling. Mato rose from his bedroll and stoked the fire without a word. Then he sat behind Persephone, his arms circling both her and the boy, their bodies forming a warm shelter against the cold. They stayed like that until Micah's breathing steadied again. When the boy finally slipped back into sleep, Persephone didn't move. Neither did Mato. I never thought I'd raise children, she murmured. They're not yours by blood, Mato said, but they're yours by choice. She leaned against his shoulder. That feels more true than anything I've known. Before dawn, the wind quieted. The lodge grew still. Come spring, Mato said, voice low. We will build a new home, one with space for all of us. Not just shelter. A place that is ours. Persephone didn't answer right away. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his beneath the blanket. I want that, she said. He turned his head toward her, their faces close in the dim light. Then we'll make it. Not long after, the snowfall deepened enough that travel outside the valley became near impossible. Days grew short and quiet. Persephone spent them sewing mittens from hide scraps, teaching the youngest children letters drawn with charcoal on bark. Her lessons grew to include 3 others, and she began carving small symbols into wood blocks so they could press them into clay and recognize the shapes by touch. One afternoon, while she and Mato walked the edge of the frozen stream gathering branches, he stopped and crouched beside a fallen log. Beneath it, a small white rabbit lay curled, unmoving. He touched its fur gently. It found shelter too late. She knelt beside him. There's still time for the rest of us. He looked up at her. There is. She reached out and brushed snow from his shoulder. When we build that new home, I want to plant something. Corn, he asked. She shook her head. Lavender. My mother once grew it. She said it keeps the air sweet. Mato stood and offered her his hand. Then we'll plant it by the door. And in the hush of that winter, they returned together, 2 people who had once stood at the edge of what they could not bear and chose, instead, to build something whole. The thaw came in slow breaths, not sudden, just a steady giving way. The river cracked first, long sheets of ice breaking apart with groans that echoed through the valley. Then came the softening of the ground, and with it the scent of earth rising through melting snow. Persephone knelt by a small patch of dark soil near the lodge, pressing her fingers into it. It was still cold, but no longer frozen. The sky above had turned softer, less harsh in its blue. Behind her, Mina was helping Mato carve fence posts from seasoned pine. The child sat cross-legged beside him, handing tools without needing to be asked. Micah chased a dog through the clearing, his laughter sharp and high in the still cool air. Persephone stood, brushing her hands clean, and walked toward Mato. I think it's time, she said. He looked up from the post he was shaping. For what? The lavender. He set the draw knife aside. Then we'll plant it tomorrow. You'll show me how. She smiled. I'll try, but I've only ever seen it once. That's enough, he said. If your hands are in the soil, it will grow. That night, they sat beneath the stars just outside the lodge. The air still held a bite, but the wind had dropped. Persephone leaned against Mato's side, her gaze fixed on the sky. I've been thinking about the school, she said. There's a wide clearing near the bend in the stream. If I had help, I could build something small. A place with walls, a roof, maybe a stove. He shifted slightly. You want to teach more than letters. I want to give them something that lasts. She paused. Something that doesn't vanish when the weather turns or when people leave. He was quiet long enough that she turned to look at him. I'll build the walls, he said. You fill them. They held each other's eyes for a long moment. No need for more than that. By mid-season, the new lodge stood near the water's edge. It had taken weeks of cutting, hauling, and shaping. Persephone had learned to square timbers and lay daub between the seams. Mato fashioned a door from cedar and hung it on pins shaped by hand. Inside, there was room for shelves, a bench, and a table where children could sit with slates and charcoal. She swept the floor with a bundle of dried grass one morning, and when she looked up, Mato stood in the doorway with a carved wooden box. He set it on the table. "For your tools." She opened it, running her fingers across the smooth grain. Inside were compartments for chalk, needles, ink, and thread. A small folded cloth rested in one corner, embroidered with a lavender sprig. "I didn't make that," he said. "Mina did." Persephone blinked. "She's learning." "She watches you," he said. "So she learns." That evening they walked beyond the ridge where the land sloped downward into a shallow hollow. Wild geese had returned to the sky. Persephone carried a small pouch of seeds wrapped in muslin, and Mato held a spade carved from horn and oak. They marked off a patch of ground near the south-facing slope and worked the soil together, quiet but for the sound of their hands moving through the dirt. After the last seed was pressed into the earth, Persephone sat back on her heels. "It doesn't look like much now." "It will," he said. They sat there until the light began to fade, and then he offered her his hand, and she took it. In early summer, the lavender bloomed. It came in slow, pale clusters that deepened by the day. The children called it the Purple Hill, and even the elders came to sit near it during the warmest hours. The scent lifted on the breeze and curled through the village, soft and clean. Persephone stood one morning beside the plants, her hands dusted with pollen. Mina ran to her, holding a folded paper. "It's from Micah," she said. "He wrote it in the schoolhouse." Persephone unfolded the note. The letters were wobbly, but the words were clear. "Thank you for staying." She pressed the paper to her chest. "Tell him he's welcome." Mato came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "They're strong because they know you won't leave," he said. She leaned back into him. "And I won't." He turned her gently, brushing his fingers down her cheek. "I've watched you change this place. You don't even see it, but I do." "I didn't mean to change anything," she said. "You didn't mean to stay either," he said. "But you did both." She reached up, her hand finding the back of his neck. "I want to marry you." His brow lifted, a slow warmth blooming in his eyes. "I was going to ask tomorrow." "Then let's not wait." They told the village that night. There were no objections, no ceremonies with pages or rings, just a gathering by the lavender hill where the fire was lit and hands were joined. Mato's sister placed a beaded necklace around Persephone's throat, and Mina handed her a bundle of sage wrapped in ribbon. When Mato kissed her, the quiet around them deepened, not silence, but stillness. As if the land itself was holding its breath. They moved into the new home together, the walls holding their warmth and laughter, the roof low enough to feel close, high enough to hold dreams. Mina and Micah slept in the corner by the stove, their own quilts folded neatly each morning. Persephone taught in the schoolhouse most days, her students growing bolder with every season. Mato hunted less, carved more, and began teaching Micah how to track by reading the shift of grass and the bend of branches. In late summer, Persephone stood in the doorway of the school, one hand resting on her belly. Mato looked up from his carving. "Are you tired?" She shook her head. "I'm full." He crossed the room slowly and knelt before her, placing his hand over hers. "This child will never wonder if they are loved." She bent to kiss the top of his head. "None of us will." They watched the lavender sway beyond the window, the sun painting long shadows across the floor. And at last, there was nothing left to wait for. No debt unpaid, no wound untended. Only the steady rhythm of a life built from ash and soil, grief and comfort, firelight and laughter. They had found their home not in wood or earth, but in each other. And nothing could take it from them. Not time. Not memory. Not even the wind.